All right, this week we're picking back up as a follow-up from last week's episode. And just to refresh everyone's memory, last week we talked about the window between knowledge and action or execution and why that gap needs to be really, really small. If you learn something new, if you don't take action on it right away, it's going to be out of sight, out of mind. And, kind of the pitfalls of that. So this week, though, we're going to talk about decision fatigue. What happens if you start acting on those decisions and almost like you're making too many decisions or you have too much on your plate and you're acting on everything, and then all of a sudden chaos ensues and then you're kind of lost and you don't know exactly the direction you want to go. So it derails your mental energy. And, quite frankly, it's how do we make better choices every day?
And energy, right? Like this all comes back to energy.
100%. Feeling exhausted or lackluster. It's like, well, let's look at everything you're acting on right now. And is everything important?
Absolutely. And I feel like the energy is good today. I can always tell, like we get on, we chat for a bit before we jump on, but our energy is both good today. It's perfect for this topic.
It's a very zen energy right now. Like I think we've kicked off this year. You and I have had side conversations and we'll share some of that here now. But the year is a little different, I think, starting this year than it was last year. Last year was like, grow, chaos, like do everything, try to create and do all these things, which was amazing because we learned so much. And then this year it was kind of like we figured out what we were capable of, and then we're just refining the alignment and making decisions, I think, smarter decisions and choosing wisely on what really makes sense and what's intentional moving forward.
Well, we practiced what we preached and did an audit and reflected on last year where we came up with the things that you just mentioned. And we're adjusting them. We're making the main things. We had this podcast as a part of that. It stayed up on the priority list. As tough as it's been, week in, week out. Not tough. We love it. It's more just the scheduling and making sure like this is a lot of work, but it is a part of that priority. But some of the other stuff is just because of decision fatigue has had to be cut out. It's essentialism, and I actually didn't even really think about it that much until we talked about it. Yeah. But it's like, yeah, actually we're living what we preach. And anyway, we're going to talk today about this decision fatigue. And there's some really common examples of this. If you're a productivity nerd or in business in general, this is what effective people do. They eliminate decision fatigue and again, strip down to the essentials. So I'm pumped to dive in today.
Yeah. So, I mean, so what are we really talking about? How does this, when you make decisions, you got to have a clear mind, you got to feel positive, you got to feel, confident and all that stuff. You tend, if you're not, you tend to make bad decisions. So a lot of that fatigue comes from exhaustion, like I said, where you're just doing too much. And so if you find yourself at that point where you're scurrying around and you're in a bit of a chaotic state, it's really just about reflection. Like, okay, let me identify the most important things in my life right now: family, relationships, career. What are the things that I really need to work on that puts me or keeps me on the path towards my definition of success? And then what are the things that are supporting that I do need to continue doing, but do I need to continue doing at the same clip or the same cadence that I'm currently doing it at? And then what are the things that are really dragging me down? What are the, or the things that don't serve me that I continue to do, maybe because they're really fun, but then I kind of lose a day or two afterwards or whatever, right?
And so, and hint there, I love that because it's these positive things that may bring pleasure or we just enjoy them, right? That can take us in that direction. But I would say those things, they're hint, they're typically the things that have been on the to-do list or where the fear resides. There's a reason you haven't done it. And that's a really good signal on the direction you need to go. The reason there's fatigue there is because you may have been hesitating on this thing, procrastinating on it because there's fear. And that's typically a real telltale sign. I know in my life, that's the direction I need to go.
Yeah, for sure. So there's this thing, you heard of the decision hierarchy?
Yes. And I loved the review after you sent over some of your notes, just going through and reviewing this because simple, but not easy. This is where your systems brain, I've been trying to, over the last 2-3 years, become more systems approach, not just action and flow and getting things done with prioritization. But these systems, once you get them rolling, which is not natural for me, are huge. So I wasn't surprised when this one came through as systems oriented as it is.
Well, you get like systems are scary. Systems, processes. It almost sounds like you're a robot. It sounds too structured, and it's, there's no room for flexibility, and it's certainly not the case. And you're still flowing. You're still living your life the way you want to, but you can take a step back and realize that, okay, I need to really, every opportunity that comes my way, every decision that I make, I just really need to dissect, is this going to serve me and my goals and what I'm trying to do? But you can't ask yourself that question if you haven't actually identified those goals or things that you're pursuing. If you're just pursuing success, well, you have to define it. Like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's table stakes. Yeah, this is back to our massive transformative purpose, what the mission is.
Right.
So we're kind of treating that as table stakes now.
So the decision hierarchy, the framework, they're classified. They're not all equal, right? You have big decisions, small decisions, or whatever, but they fall into 3 different type of categories. First one is high impact strategic decisions. They have big long-term consequences, like maybe you're buying a house, or you're moving to a new state for a career, or you decide to get married or have a child or whatever, like long-term, that's going to really impact your life. What are those decisions? What's your investment strategy? Or maybe you're a business owner hiring a key employee, or maybe you're a team player or a team member, and it's like, what's the career for me and the move that I want to make? And if this is the right one that I'm currently in, how can I make this go in the direction I want it to go? The next one is medium impact, tactical decisions, things that are more short term that can be adjusted later, right? Like, so those big ones you can't really adjust on the fly, but your medium impact ones could be like budgeting tweaks. If you're spending a lot of money going out to restaurants and one of your goals is to be a little bit more financially independent, then you can make a decision like, maybe I'm going to say no to this restaurant, and I'm only going to do it once a week as opposed to 3 or 4 times a week that I have been doing. And so you kind of have those mental, internal decisions that pop up in your brain, and maybe it's cravings or whatever, and you make those choices. And then the last one is low impact, minor decisions, very trivial, very routine. They don't significantly impact any outcomes, but like, what am I going to eat today? If I'm on a diet and I know that I want to, pursue my health goals, am I going to have the cheeseburger today, or am I going to have, the chicken breast?
Lean meat, vegetables. But
it's not going to kill me tomorrow. Right. Like, I'm not going to feel great, maybe, but it's not going to kill me in 2 days, and I can just get back on the routine. So you got those 3. They all every decision you make is going to fall into one of those buckets. It's either low, medium, or high. And the whole approach to all of these is like, what can I automate? What can I delegate? And what can I eliminate? And how do I build those habits around the decision hierarchy?
And I think one of the most common ones here that people know about, especially on the low end, not important, is attire or wardrobe from some of the top. Steve Jobs, Barack Obama, Zuck. Now, Zuck's become kind of a fashionista recently with his rebrand, which we won't go down that rabbit hole. But Jobs always wore the turtleneck. Barack had 2 suits. I think it was charcoal and navy. That was something that they knew what they were putting on every day and didn't think about. I haven't been able to go that far yet. I like the capsule wardrobe, and we're not going to talk about clothes too much here, but it's just a really common example that, this wasn't the only area in these guys' lives that they did this. It was the most forward facing because we see them in the same outfit over and over. But just to tee up the conversation, this is one of those low things that you can have this playbook. It's a system that you can completely eliminate, take that off your plate because of the energy. We got a battery, and every decision, no matter how small, drains that battery throughout the day. Little transactions. You got deposits with our sleep for our energy, our diet, but those withdrawals, we're trying to minimize those. And that's what my favorite portion, the eliminate, removes those and gives us the most energy.
Yeah, and that battery depletes significantly when you're treating a low minor decision like it's a high impact decision. Mm-hmm. How often do we do that? Oh. Right? It's like, this is so trivial. Like, why are we spending so much time on this? Like, just move on or make the choice.
When you do a fast, I was just talking through our buddy Tommy, 'cause he's doing a fast, and he was asking me about all kinds of details. When you do a fast, you realize how much you think about food. It's not just the 30 minutes you're eating, or hopefully you're not eating that fast, but I eat fast and kind of just, but the thought of getting the food, the thought of preparing the food, the dishes after the food. When am I going to do those dishes? Like, it's wild.
You're dreaming about food.
And then you just don't eat, and you're like, holy cow. Like you notice the time back in your life. It's wild. Anyway, just an example there.
Yeah. Did you know, I learned this recently from a doctor, a naturopath, that you're supposed to chew your food like 20 to 30 times?
Yeah. I think Gandhi said,
gross.
you should be drinking your food, which sounds gross. But when you get into the science of the saliva, how it activates the digestive pattern, like your stomach is preparing for it, and how the saliva mixes with the nutrients affects the whole thing. Yes, I went down a rabbit hole in here because I eat way too fast. It's actually a terrible thing. So that's where the mindfulness meditation of people, when they're sitting down and you see them organize the food and take one bite at a time, it actually drives me nuts, gives me a little bit more anxiety. But I've tried to get out of my comfort zone and really slow down with those meals because of all the benefits. Drink your food, folks.
Yeah. Well, and one of your benefits is that you get fuller faster, right? You're not scarfing down everything because, you're giving your... Oh, I've tried it too. It's so tough, dude. It's it's just slime. It's gross. It's like slime, but it's apparently it's supposedly,
Yeah, there's a delay. Your brain doesn't register you're full till I forgot how many minutes it is after. So there's a Japanese saying about this. It's a term known throughout the community about eating slow because of this whole fullness thing. It's eat to 60 or 70% of your plate, because then you'll realize you're full. Anyway, we're going down.
We're going on a tangent here, but I think it was just interesting.
That's the beauty of the pod.
Totally. Well, going back to those medium, decisions, the medium impact ones. So we've brought up mental models and things like that on the podcast before. And one of the ones for the medium one is the Pareto principle is a mental model. I just learned about it.
Oh, baby. Now you're really speaking my language.
Dude, you know about this? I don't know.
The Pareto. The Pareto principle is universal.
Okay. Explain it. I'm just barely getting it. There's a name to it. I probably know it, but explain it for us.
So the Pareto principle is the 80-20 rule. Essentially, 20% of our actions make up 80% of our results. When you look at an organization, a lot of people won't like to hear this, but 20% of the people are responsible for 80% of the revenue and productivity. But this is also in nature. When you look at the amount of, I think it's Pareto principle, water. It's whatever percentage of the world is water is 78% or whatever.
Well, even our bodies, aren't we made up of a ridiculous, we're 80% water or something?
Absolutely. But when you look at your life, 20% of the things you're doing are responsible for 80% of the outcomes. It's these small actions, your sleep, your diet, the things that we talk about they're responsible for all the other results. And to your point earlier, we start worrying about that other 80% of stuff that only impacts 20% of our life, and you inverse it. That's not where we want to be spending our time. I thought about getting a Pareto principle tattoo, because there's a great book on it.
What would that look like? Would you get words or something? Or
well, there's kind of a calculation on. There's also the Fibonacci sequence.
Did you got to throw it right on the side of your neck?
Well, we had that bet. Remember, we were going to do the NFL.
Yeah. Well, now we're getting into we're going to have mental model tattoo bet on who gets. I don't know what the stakes would be, but yeah. I mean, the point is what can you eliminate from that 80% that you're constantly working on that doesn't serve you because it's only producing 20% of the outcome, and what do you go all in on with the 20%? Those are the high impact type of decisions. So doubling down on that 20% is what matters essentially.
So this is what's amazing when you start looking at it in nature, because it's obviously huge in economics. When you look at like how money flows, system, GDP, everything like that. But like in nature, thanks to ChatGPT, like 80% of an ecosystem stability comes from 20% of the species. So a lot of the animals out there are kind of redundant and don't have an impact. They only impact the actual ecosystem 20%. And then 20% of predator species, wolves, lions, big cats, they regulate 80% of the prey population. So your rabbits, your smaller, more herbivores. 20% of the trees absorb 80% of the sunlight in the forest. That's wild.
That's crazy.
It is. If you go down this rabbit hole and then apply it to your life, especially when you look at organizations, like how, of all the organizations you've been around, how accurate is it? This is what Elon did at Twitter. 20% of the employees were responsible for 80% of the results. Immediate cut. Now, we don't want to go that extreme, and most companies won't. Yeah. But most organizations, when you look at them, the executive team, the leadership team, and then when you get down to the micro, 20% of the individual contributors are always in that top tier. So it's a fascinating principle. And one to live your life by, because you'll start seeing it everywhere.
Yeah, it's like you can model that out. Like you can just jot down what are the 20% of the things that turns out, like where am I successful and why am I successful in these areas of my life? What are the 4, 5, 6, 7 things that I'm doing? And then it really is probably less than 10, right? When it comes to your health, fitness, focus, what are you putting into your body, all that kind of stuff. And then what are the other things that you're doing that makes up the 80%, and like, how do you eliminate those and how do you identify them? And probably writing it down is going to be the best way to do that. It's just having clarity so you can visually see what those items are. So that's a good challenge for the week, I guess, is a good takeaway is, if you're listening to this, write down the things that serve you really well. Like when do you feel the most, like the best or the most successful in your day? And what are those things that are causing that outcome? Write those down. And then when you don't feel so great, what are the things that are causing that outcome? And how do you eliminate those things if you can do it?
Absolutely. And one last example, just to show how powerful this is, if you haven't looked into the Pareto principle or 80-20 rule, it's the same exact thing. My second bullet on my business plan for the sales org this year, that was it, because it is historically accurate that 20% of my accounts, 80% of the revenue comes from 20% of the list. So this just has become a literal law. It is to me, it's not a principle, it's a law.
Yeah. And
last example, I think that 80% of the world's population lives in 20% of the real estate, 20% of the world's area,
like where you
80% of the population lives within it, which that's just rural versus city, et cetera. But okay. We have nailed the Pareto principle.
Yes, we have. All right. So how do an example, you mentioned, Obama and Jobs and some others, like Bezos, for instance, he looks at his decision model as type 1, type 2. What is the type 1 decisions for him are what's irreversible or high impact choices. So going back to identifying, if I say yes to this and pursue this, can I reverse that? And if the answer is no, you've made your bed in that decision, then you've got to take your freaking time on making sure that's the right decision. That's not an act fast type of decision, right? And then type 2 is easily reversible or low stakes. So in that sense, stop wasting your time. Boom, act fast, go right in and find out what's possible. So that's, an example is testing a new product feature or something like that versus acquiring a business. Right. Those are, you can kind of see those. Those are really general, easily seen examples, but there's so many times where we have so many decisions throughout our daily life. We don't really know if we're going to be able to reverse it or not. And so you just have to kind of figure out what that looks like for you in your life. Right. And so
second, third order consequences. We did a whole pod on that. It's the same thing. And I think this also ties in, and all of the folks that you just mentioned, it's also about mapping to your energy. Now, for most people, this is going to be early in the day. This is the eat the frog theme. What is that one thing that you're kind of avoiding, that tough goal? You map that to your highest energy state. If that's first thing in the morning, which it is for a lot of people, and just getting it done is helpful, that is when you want to put that task in. If you, for some reason, are one of the outliers where it's afternoon, I get my second boost in a very interesting margin in the afternoon, plug it in there. If you're a night owl, it's the first thing you should be doing in the night when you start that night routine. But mapping these tasks to your highest energy level, they should pair up. I mean, commonsensical, but we don't do that. We'll do the mediocre stuff, the easy stuff, because there's the domino effect that says, oh, if I get a couple key wins, that sets me up for the whole day. Maybe, but most of the time we're just trying to take the path of least resistance, scattering our energy, and then we're depleted. It's gone by 3 or 4 p.m. and we're shot.
Well, one of the things that I do is like the night before, I'll look at my calendar for tomorrow. Like I have no idea what's going on tomorrow right now. I'll find out tonight. Or the morning of. Like Kimberly, she will send me like the schedule for the kids. Like, dude, life is wild right now. It's like, okay, you got to pick up from school. You got to drive to this practice, drive to that practice. Oh, and their friend's going to pick up from this practice and go to that practice. And it's all these things. Like she's the coordinator. Like she does an amazing job. But I'm like, if you tell me what to do on Thursday, on Monday, I'm just going to ask you again Wednesday night what I got to do tomorrow or Thursday morning. And so now she's gotten really good of, she'll just shoot me a text, which is like her leaving a note, essentially. Here's the schedule of things you need to do. What that does when you have a partner that understands how you operate and the decisions that you make, I'm able to build my schedule around that. And I don't even have to think about it. I just get to follow the schedule. So like the goal of your day should be making the least amount of decisions and only working on the highest impact things. So limiting the number of decisions you have to make. So if you've got all these, if you got to think about like, okay, how am I going to do this? Or where am I going to go here? Or where am I going to do that? Especially at work, if you've got tasks on your plate and you know you need to knock these out outside of your personal life and you got your professional life, you focus on I got 3 or 4 or 5 clients that need my attention tomorrow. I've got to knock this out tomorrow. These are the tasks I'm focused on. Knocking them out in a nice little routine. And that way it flows and not so much like, I got to get it done in 2 hours. Well, no, I just got to get it done tomorrow. And so I can plan that out.
Good.
It's so good.
So good.
And then by the end of the day, you're like inbox 0 and you're like, got it. But then you leave it when you have that flow, you leave room for reactive decisions that you have to make, especially in a busy professional setting that, you and I both are, where it's just stuff coming at us all the time. You have to allow that time in order to be reactive. So you're not letting people, leaving people hanging when you need to be there for them. But you don't have to, you can assess the task at hand. Like, do I have to do this today? Do I have to do this within the hour? If the answer is yes, I'm like, okay, then I reprioritize and I do that. But if not, it's just communication and setting the expectation of like, okay, perfect. I've received this. I'm going to go ahead and knock this out for you by the end of tomorrow. I'll shoot you a note when I have it completed. Or if I have questions, I'll follow up. Right. And that's where the communication piece, you're not leaving anyone hanging. You're making minimal decisions. Now I don't even need to focus on that thing that came through until tomorrow. Or if I free up my entire day, then I can, I got some extra time. Maybe I'll just knock it out now. But when you limit the amount of decisions that you have to make, it really keeps that battery high. And I've taken one of those HR assessment type tests, and my battery is super low, man. Like I have the lowest battery on my team, where once it's depleted, it gets depleted real quick. Like I take a break like every hour. I get up from the desk, I move around, and then I come back and refresh. But for that 1 hour, I am so laser focused and knock it all out. And then but you got to figure out what that battery is for you. You may have a long battery, like Kimberly has a long battery, but then she's toast at night. She's like, you're not going to hear from her. She's just like, she's chilling all night. But I think you have to figure out what's going to deplete that battery. And these minuscule and heavy decisions that come at us every single day, it's figuring out which ones are the priority and which ones can I put off for later because it's okay. It's not an urgent, it's not a fire. And that will keep that battery capacity on a daily basis at optimal level for yourself. And you won't have that fatigue and you won't find yourself making bad decisions.
100%. And you just brought up something that I didn't see in your notes, but I kind of included and wanted to touch on because we've all experienced this. And this goes back to like the struggle phase in the flow cycle. We've all been there when you think you're done, like you think you're toast, but then you like push through because you have to. And then all of a sudden you get that next, I hadn't heard this term, ultradian rhythms. This is also back to the flow cycle, like 90-minute focus sprints. Not a hard rule, but it's a pretty good guideline. That's what I'm shooting for is 90 minutes on deep tasks. But if you have to and you push forward, this is a runner's thing for your.
I was going to say that the first thing that popped to my mind was the runner's high you get at like mile 4 or 5.
The second wind.
Yeah.
And so when we have to get it done, we push through that resistance. Here it comes. And so it's also knowing, am I tired or am I really trying, am I fearful? Am I just tapping out? Because we're always, when we think that we're toast, we usually have only used like 60% of our battery.
Well, was it Jocko or Goggins or one of those crazy fools that was like, dude, when you're only using like what, 40% of your, like you can give another, I don't know what the number, you probably know better than I do, but you have a ton of ability left when you think you're totally done. It's your mind saying stop, but your body can keep going.
Yeah, the military's tested that before. When you get down to survival, and we don't want to be doing this all the time, right? But man's reach exceeds his grasp is the saying that I always like. Well, what's here is what we know, what we're always doing, but we can go so much further. We just we rarely push it, and pushing it, that's what feels so good. Like, that's what I've been thinking about through this podcast, is a realization that most people think it's the beach or, the sofa, unwinding, watching Netflix, like that's the feel good things in life. But there is nothing that feels good better than being effective. Like, this isn't just productivity. It's, man, I earned the pillow today and I have all this evidence to show for it.
Yeah.
That is what feels good. And if you can get that reward system cranking, man, you're cooking. And this is not completely consistent for me yet, but it's getting better because I know I'm searching for that feeling of, okay, earned the pillow, earned my rest.
100%. Well, dude, I think this was an awesome 2-part pod series.
We were all over the place on this one, but I enjoyed the heck out of it.
I mean, basically we went from being a lifelong learner, forcing yourself to learn something new, go put yourself out there, figure things out. And then the gap between once you've learned it to action, minimize that gap if it makes sense and it aligns. If it sparks energy, it hits your core values, all the things. And it's a great opportunity. Jump on it within 24 hours. Broke that down on the last pod. And then this one is, well, what happens if you say yes to too many things? You think all of them are good opportunities. And it's like, how do I eliminate the things that I'm saying yes to and avoid the chaos? And what does that fatigue do to my decision-making ability and some good examples? So as a recap, write some things down. Use that 80-20 rule. What are the 20% things that are moving the needle for you, that are causing 80% of the success that you have? And what are the things that you're doing that are only causing 20% of the success that you have? And how can you eliminate those? So delegate the things you can, outsource it, use tools, partners, vendors, whatever, if it's professional or in your personal life. Leverage your relationships and communicate. And I think it was awesome. I think it was
bamboo really cool. Bangers, my man. We got some good guests coming up in the hopper, and we'll look forward to being back with you next week.
Like, subscribe, follow. We're on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you're listening. Give us a follow. Do it. Don't be lazy. I know you're listening to it. Just click on the follow button. We like to see that stuff, and it really helps us, keeps us going. But we got some really cool guests coming up and some more impactful conversations.
Boom.